Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today, we're diving into a book. Let's see, how do I put this? It's not just an economic theory, it's a personal story. Rebuilding a nation from scratch.
Yeah, Wohlstand für Alle, Prosperity for All, by Ludwig Erhard, West Germany's Minister of Economics. During those critical post-war years, 1949 to 1963, it's his vision, his struggles, and his take on what became West Germany's economic miracle.
Okay, so for our listeners who might not know, what exactly is this social market economy he's pushing for?
Imagine a system that's all about free market principles, but with a bit of heart. Erhard really rejected planned economies, arguing that competition, not government control, fuels the kind of growth that helps everyone, especially consumers.
So social means it's not,
Here.
just cutthroat capitalism.
You got it. Erhard believed in a solid social safety net, but one that works with, not against, individual effort and a free market. He wanted everyone to prosper, not just a select few, but through empowerment, not reliance on handouts.
Got it. So before we jump into his solutions, let's set the scene. What was Germany's economic situation like right after the war?
Picture this: widespread poverty, sky-high unemployment, and their industrial base. Once Germany's strong point, totally destroyed. And on top of that, the Potsdam Agreement. It capped their industrial output to a tiny fraction of what it was before the war, meant to stop them from rearming, but a huge roadblock to recovery.
And then you have millions of refugees displaced from former territories, putting even more strain on resources and housing.
Exactly, a recipe for disaster. But that's where Erhard's ideas come in. He saw a way out, not through government control, but by using the power of the market to lift Germany up. And it all began with a bold move, the 1948 currency reform.
Right. Swapping the old Reichsmark for the Deutschmark. Wasn't that a bit controversial back then?
Very much so. While it created a stable foundation for the new economy, it also led to price hikes. And a lot of people feared runaway inflation. But Erhard stood his ground against price controls. He believed the market would find its own balance. And he faced a lot of criticism from the Social Democrats, who wanted a planned economy.
He must have had some serious guts, especially with unemployment over 1.5 million in 1949. People like Dr. Nolting, they were pushing for heavy government intervention, saying Erhard's approach was making things worse.
Oh, absolutely. But Erhard fought back with data. He showed that industrial production was going up, and crucially, real wages were actually increasing despite those initial price jumps. He argued that government intervention would just drag out the suffering, not fix it.
Like they say, the cure is worse than the disease. And then, just as things were looking up, the Korean War starts in 1950. What impact did that have on this fragile recovery?
The Korean War. It really threw a wrench in the works. It caused shortages, another round of price increases, and you guessed it, more demands for interventionist policies. But again, Erhard held firm, showing his belief in a balanced approach.
So, he wasn't totally against any government action.
Right. He did take specific steps to steady the economy, but without abandoning his core principles. For example, he brought in the law against profiteering to stop people taking advantage during the crisis. There were also some adjustments to credit and import restrictions, but these were tactical moves, not giving in to total market control.
Sounds like he was walking a tightrope, trying to keep the economy stable. And the public.
Confident. Did he pull it off?
Incredibly, he did. By the mid-1950s, West Germany was seeing impressive economic growth, low unemployment, and a rising standard of living, the Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle. It was in full swing. But what's really interesting is Erhard's approach went beyond just economic policy. He grasped the psychology of prosperity. Now that's fascinating. What do you mean by that? So he wasn't just focused on numbers and interest rates. He was trying to influence how people thought.
Exactly. He believed that people's expectations and their faith in the system were just as important as any policy. He really understood the power of communication. He used public speeches a lot to ask for responsible wage and price negotiations. He emphasized that everyone, businesses, citizens, we all share the responsibility for keeping things stable.
So it wasn't just about setting up the right economic conditions. It was about fostering a sense of shared responsibility.
You got it. He even personally answered letters from people, addressing their worries and criticisms. That direct and approachable style really helped build trust and create a feeling of optimism that the country could actually prosper.
And that brings us back to the title, Prosperity for All. It wasn't just about material wealth, but a shared mindset, a belief in the system's potential.
Absolutely, and he was firm that the way to achieve this shared prosperity was through competition. He believed that real competition was the key to innovation, efficiency, and ultimately lower prices and better products for consumers. He saw cartels and monopolies as the enemy, holding back this essential energy and hurting consumers along the way.
So not just a champion of free markets, but a champion of the consumer. Where did he run into the most resistance to this vision?
He faced opposition from everywhere. Industry groups wanting protectionist measures, trade associations looking for special treatment, even the craft sector wanted exemptions from all the competitive pressures. Erhard saw this as a slippery slope back to cronyism and a stagnant economy. He was determined to break away from that past.
He had to be pretty tough to stand up to those powerful groups.
He even took on some social policies, arguing that what he called social romanticism could actually hinder economic growth and individual responsibility. He supported targeted social programs that help people without creating dependency. His book really shows this constant back and forth between different ideologies and ideas for Germany's future.
Speaking of the book, we've talked a lot about Erhard's ideas, but what about the book itself? What makes Wohlstand für Alle such an engaging read?
What's really interesting is how personal and direct it is. It's not some boring economic textbook. It's a passionate defense of his vision. You can practically hear his voice as he explains his arguments and takes on his critics.
I remember one part where he talks about his desire to break with the old conservative social structure. Through broadly based mass purchasing power, it's a clear statement he wanted to create a more equitable society, where prosperity was shared more widely.
Right. That's a perfect example, and throughout the book, he connects his economic principles to this bigger social vision. For Erhard, prosperity wasn't just the goal. It was a way to achieve greater social justice and opportunity for all.
And he really stresses the role of the individual in driving this progress. He writes, "The most promising means of achieving and securing any prosperity is competition. It alone leads to economic progress benefiting all people, particularly in their role as consumers." He saw the consumer as king, the ultimate driver of innovation and improvement in a free market.
Exactly. He believed in the power of individual initiative, of human ingenuity to solve problems and create value. He compared this to the top-down, controlled economies of the past, where just a few people decided the direction of the economy.
There's a real sense of optimism in his writing, a belief that if you give people freedom and opportunity, they will rise to the challenge. But he also acknowledges the anxieties and difficulties of this approach.
Absolutely. He was constantly defending his vision against those who wanted security and stability through government control. He saw that as a path to stagnation, a return to the cronyism and inefficiency of the past.
And he didn't shy away from strong language to make his point. He described his opponent's desire for price controls as wanting to drive the German people through the steel bath of free prices. It's a striking image. That evokes the tough realities of economic adjustment.
It shows how skilled he was with rhetoric. He knew how to use vivid language and metaphors to connect with people, to appeal to their emotions as well as their reason. He understood the power of storytelling to explain complex economic ideas.
He wasn't just an economist. He was a communicator, a leader who knew how to rally public opinion behind his vision.
And while he was deeply principled, he was also pragmatic. Remember what he did during the Korean War? He showed a willingness to adapt and use targeted interventions to stabilize the economy, without giving up his core beliefs.
He's walking that tightrope, balancing principle and practicality.
Exactly, and that balancing act is clear in his discussion of the economic miracle. He recognized that many factors contributed to West Germany's rapid recovery: the Marshall Plan, the hard work of the German people, and good global economic conditions all played a part. But he also argued that his policies provided the essential framework, the foundation for this success.
So it wasn't just luck or chance. There was a deliberate strategy behind it.
And a key part of that strategy was his ability to communicate his ideas to the public, to break down complex economic concepts into simple, relatable terms.
He wasn't just talking to economists. He was speaking directly to the German people, explaining how his vision would benefit them, their families, their future.
And this leads us to another crucial theme in the book, price stability. Erhard was almost obsessed with stopping inflation. Why was that so important to him?
He seemed to think inflation was more than just a money problem. What was the reason for that?
He saw it as a danger to society, like something that could tear a country apart. Remember, he experienced the hyperinflation of the 1920s in Germany. It wiped out savings and contributed to the rise of extremism. He wanted to make sure that didn't happen again.
So it was a really personal belief for him.
Absolutely. He believed stable prices were crucial, not just for a good economy, but for social and political stability too. He argued that out-of-control inflation makes people distrust institutions. It creates uncertainty and fear, and eventually leads to unrest.
And that connects back to the psychology of prosperity, right?
Exactly. He thought public expectations played a big role in either fueling or stopping inflation. If people think prices are going to keep going up, they'll demand higher pay, which pushes prices up even more, creating that dreaded wage price spiral.
So he had to fight against not only the economic realities of inflation, but also the psychology that could make it worse.
He called it demagogically fueled illusionism, this idea that you can get something for nothing, that you can have constantly increasing wages without higher productivity, or that you can just print money with no consequences. He saw this as a dangerous fantasy, something that needed to be addressed directly.
It sounds like he was fighting on several fronts at once. Against rising prices in the economy, against powerful groups who benefited from protectionism, and against a mindset that he thought was undermining a healthy society.
He was a real advocate for his ideas, that's for sure. And he didn't hold back in using strong language to make his point. He even compared currency devaluation to losing human dignity, suggesting that the right to stable money should be a basic human right.
Wow, that's a strong statement. And talking about strong statements, one of those famous lines from the book is his comparison for how to deal with inflation. He says, just as a doctor injects a bacillus as an antitoxin into a human being infected with a contagious disease, so I wish to prevent the outbreak of an economic disease to localize a crisis by constantly talking about prices.
That's classic Erhard. He was great at using vivid images and metaphors to explain complicated economic concepts. In that one sentence, he makes price stability sound like a matter of national health, and he positions himself as the doctor fighting against the illness of inflation.
It's also a subtle reminder that sometimes tough measures are needed, like his strict financial policies, to get a long-term solution. But his vision wasn't just about fixing Germany's economy. He was thinking bigger.
He was a big believer in free trade and thought it would help all the countries involved. He challenged the idea that one country's gain has to mean another country's loss. He saw a strong German economy as good for its trading partners, opening up new markets and opportunities for everyone.
So not just focused on Germany, but a global thinker in a way.
You could say that. He was a big supporter of organizations like the European Payments Union, which tried to make trade easier and currencies convertible between European countries. He saw it as a step toward a more united and successful Europe, one that could stand strong in the world.
And all this was happening during the Cold War.
That's right. He was writing when the world was divided. And his ideas about economic policy were definitely influenced by the political realities of that time. He was openly anti-communist and saw West Germany's economic success as a strong contrast to the Soviet system.
He believed that a prosperous and free West Germany could be a symbol of hope for people living under communist rule.
But even in his own country, not everyone agreed with his ideas. He faced opposition from those who wanted the government to have more control over the economy.
The Social Democrats, for instance, they wanted a more socialist system. They said Erhard's free market policies were too harsh and created too much inequality.
Yeah, they pointed to the high unemployment in the years right after the currency reform. They claimed it was proof that his policies were hurting ordinary people.
But Erhard countered that government intervention would ultimately stifle growth and be bad for everyone in the end. He really believed that the free market was the best way to create wealth and opportunity.
He wasn't totally against any kind of government help, though. He recognized the need for a safety net, a system to help those who were truly struggling. But he was careful to separate this from what he called social romanticism, which he saw as unrealistic and ultimately damaging to a healthy economy.
He argued for a balance, a system that would help people without making them dependent, that would encourage work and innovation, but also guarantee a basic level of security for everyone.
A tricky balance to strike. And it's a debate we're still having today. As we deal with globalization, automation, and the changing world of work, Erhard's ideas, even though they came from post-war Germany, offer a useful way to think about these modern challenges.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Wohlstand für Alle, it seems like the book's message goes beyond its historical setting.
Absolutely. It's not just a history lesson. It's a reminder that economic policy is really about people. It's about creating a system that empowers individuals, encourages responsibility, and unleashes the creativity that drives human progress.
And Wohlstand für Alle makes us ask ourselves, what kind of economic system do we want to build for the future? One based on control and dependence, or one that embraces freedom, competition, and individual initiative?
Those are the big questions, aren't they? And Erhard's work doesn't give us easy answers, but it gives us a framework for thinking critically and constructively about these essential issues.
He reminds us that economic freedom is not just about policies, it's about giving power to individuals, building a culture of innovation, and creating a society where everyone has the chance to succeed. And with that thought, we'll leave you to consider those big questions. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Wohlstand für Alle. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those books open.
Always enjoy it.